welcome back to the fourth now intermission. Very excited. So my name is Lucas Stuber with Speech Science, and I'm honored to be hosting the online conference together with Dr. Carolyn Musselwhite, and of course, Mylene Chan and her team at Gap Guru University. Those of us who've joined us for the intermissions before know there is unfortunately not ASHA CEUs for these sessions. That was a choice of ours. We wanted to be able to kind of play it fast and loose, but they're intended to be fun and entertaining and informative. So I have the honor today of introducing Mr. Sean Sweeney, and I guess without further ado, we'll just launch into it. If you want to tell us something about yourself, and let's learn.
Great. Okay, I'll share my screen first. And let's see. Oh, I wasn't expecting that to happen, but we'll see. There we go. Okay, and play. Does that look good? Looks okay?
Yeah, looks great to me.
Okay, good. Okay. I'm not that familiar with Zoom either. So who I am, I'm Sean. I'm a speech and language therapist by original training, and I worked for many years in the public school system in Newton, Mass, right outside of Boston. And through those years, I just cultivated an interest in technology as a tool within my work in speech and language pathology. I just found it to be a great intervention tool. And throughout my career, here's my big disclaimer at the beginning. Throughout my career, I've worked mostly with mild to moderate populations and not so much with students with complex communication needs. But through my time working in this sort of combo thing, which I do now, which I'll describe more, I've come in contact with some great people like Carrie Davis, who made some contributions to this, Dr. Carrie Davis, who made some contributions to this presentation, and she was a colleague and friend, and we wrote an article for ASHA Perspectives. So one of the things she explained to me was that even though I'm not necessarily working day to day with students with complex communication needs who use AAC, a lot of the principles are the same and the tools can be the same, because what I've been talking about for the last about 7 years is the way that educational technology tools have a lot of bearing on speech and language therapy. So it doesn't matter quite as much. It matters somewhat, and you can adapt as you need to. Exactly the mode that students are communicating in, but ed tech can provide context for that work. So currently I work in a private practice, having worked through years in the schools and going back and getting a second master's degree in instructional tech. And then working in that role for a few years in a middle school. And since then, I've started a bit of consulting and presenting in different places across the country about the way that the iPad and technology in general can be repurposed, and apps that weren't necessarily designed for speech and language pathology are great tools to provide, again, context within therapy. So I have a blog. It's called speechtechie.com. It's named after you. It's not named after me. I always say it's named after everyone who's interested in involving technology in our work and fostering communication. I work, as I said, in a private practice, doing a lot of consults to schools during the day. So it's a nice combination of things. So the focus of this little short talk is ed tech talking with AAC. So really metaphorically, the kind of conversation we can have with the field of educational technology, and I'll use that term synonymously with instructional technology. They're pretty much the same. And the way that we can, have literal conversations with people who can be resources for us, but also kind of access the information that's out there from educational technology that can have bearing on the field of speech and language pathology, and with a few examples specifically about AAC. So I did throw these slides into Google Drive for you. I'll put this link up at the end as well. You will want to write it down if you're here and you're interested, and it's at bit.ly. You have to put that in exactly, /Sweeney, that's my name. Note the EY, AAC after work. And that will lead you to a Google Drive link, and you can just download these slides if you're interested, if there's anything on there you wanted to grasp and you didn't get, or if you want to share them with anyone, feel free, of course. So part of my, my involvement with thinking about AAC and AAC users was had the opportunity to write an article with Carrie Davis, and that was in 2014. I don't know where those 3 years went, and it's up on the ASHA website on their Perspectives series, so specifically in the Perspectives on Augmentative and Alternative Communication journal, which now they've kind of combined into one Perspectives journal for all special interest groups. So you can check that out if you're interested in exploring some more of the ideas or see some of the things that we cited there, and it's called Reading, Writing, AAC, Mobile Tech Strategies for Literacy and Language Development. And so you know, it is behind a paywall because you have to be a special interest group member in order to access Perspectives issues. I get $0 if you buy the article, but you can also just sort of tackle anyone in your department who is a special interest group member and have them get that for you. So it has more information. So as I said, I went back to school to get a second master's in instructional technology, which is really around the educational uses of technology. It gave me a pretty broad look at the ideas behind instructional tech and the ways they could be used. In those days, I did a lot of PowerPoints because this was back in, I think, I don't know, 93, no, 2003 or so, and some years preceding that. But what I wanted to show in this presentation were some different examples of conversations that can take place in different ways. So a scroll represents the kind of very formal announcement of what something is or what's going to happen. Instructional technology refers to the concept, theory, or field that focus on facilitating learning through technology under conditions that are purposeful and controlled. So this is a statement from the Association of Educational Communications and Technology. And for us, we may think that some aspects of educational theory and pedagogy aren't that connected to what we do, and it's always nice to see the connections between therapy and education, particularly when we're working in an educational setting. So a reply from SLPs might be, you know, we're really all about structure and finding conditions that are purposeful and controlled that we can facilitate learning. So it makes sense the interplay between the way instructional technology can be used in a broader educational sense and the way that we use it. There are a lot of great resources in instructional technology that I think that speech and language pathologists don't know about and would be great to access. And one of those is ISTE, which is the International Society for Technology and Education. They have wonderful publications and a really terrific conference every year. I've never had the chance to go. It's really, I always go to ASHA, and that is enough of a hubbub for me. But they have lots of online materials and standards for both students and for educators. So we can look at what our students should be able to be doing with technology, depending on what level they're at. And also for educators, I think it's great that they provide an idea of what they would like educators to be able to do with technology. So for example, this one, 5A, use technology to create, adapt, and personalize learning experiences that foster independent learning and accommodate learner differences and needs. I think also just speaks to what we do every day in every session, you know, whether we use technology or not, but particularly when we use technology, this applies. It was very interesting to me when I was getting my second master's, and I had to write a number of too many theses, and one of them I had to do a research project and look at whatever I wanted to, and I looked at the literature base of technology use in the field of speech and language pathology, and I found quite a bit, even though, as I said, this was like early 90s, so some of the research that was there, or just the literature was talking about very early forms of interactive technology, like the use of HyperCard and Kid Pics, things that were pretty simple. It's interesting to me that though there were a lot of good articles written back then in the kind of broad sense about how speech and language pathologists could use technology, even though it was pretty hard to use back then, there hasn't been a lot of big statements and broad articles about it of late. So I would like to see that more, but we could say that what's going on with when we try to create and adapt and personalize learning experiences, we call that feature matching. So it's a good conversation between instructional tech and what we do specifically. Some of the things that have been developed more recently in the field of instructional tech, I think also inform upon our use of technology. And one of the popular models, and a lot of people do extensive professional development around this model called the SAMR model. Everyone likes acronyms, and SAMR stands for sort of a ladder that we can climb in our technology use. And it isn't necessarily that we have to be at the top of it. It's sort of one of my ideas about SLP conversation back to things like SAMR. But what it stands for is substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition, with kind of a ladder where substitution is when we're using technology and it's acting as a tool substitute, and there isn't really any functional change in the task that we're asking students to do. So that's like electronic flashcards and books. So that's sort of my example within our own field. Augmentation, which means a different thing to speech and language pathologists, but technology acting as a direct tool substitute with functional improvements. So we're really kind of doing the same kind of task, but there's an something makes it a little bit better. So if an app keeps data or an app records audio. The M, modification. This is when the technology allows us to do something, much different than what we might do with just pencil and paper and non-tech tools. So when we could create, say, a multimedia book that incorporates audio and video, projects that are multimedia that let us create an animation, or just the ability to share a product home is also a good modification example. Where redefinition, which is considered sort of this high level, where technology provides the opportunity for previously inconceivable tasks. So one of my messages when I do presentations is always like, wow, redefinition seems really tough to get to, where, they mention things that are examples of redefinition, like using Skype to bring in experts that you might not have been able to bring into the classroom before. But I also consider apps that provide really cool interactive experiences as being something that was previously inconceivable in a teaching setting and a therapy setting as well. So apps that give our students examples, experiences with world schema, like the apps from Dr. Panda, the apps from Tokaboka, where you can sort of bring them to a simulated place, is a good example. And one of the quotes that I found, and this is sort of SLP speaking back, used an index card because this is a little old school, speaking back to this sort of idea from one of our own mavens, Carol Westby. She really emphasized the role of interactivity and a resource that can foster interaction between the student and the device, and the student and the SLP, or between students in a cooperative group, and how resources that are interactive align with social interactionist theories of language development. So she mentioned also simulation games, and she was talking about at that time things like SimCity, but there's a lot simpler simulation games now that can be used as a context for developing higher level discourse and language organization skills. So she's talking kind of a macro level there of like telling a story about what's going on, but for students with more complex needs, a lot of these resources can be used to develop more micro skills and vocabulary and verb tense and development of use of verbs, those sort of things too. So in our article, this is a direct quote from Carrie and I. And I'm just going to hold on one second. I didn't realize when I would screen share that I can't see the time. That's one tech problem here. So I'll go back. Okay, good. From a functional and therapeutic perspective, family members and practitioners should consider how one mobile tech may serve as a dedicated communication device, but may be supported by other assistive technology tools. So what Carrie was encouraging in the discussion with me in this article and how we collaborate around it was the way that students wouldn't necessarily leave the communication screen or communication app in order to go use an interactive app on that same device, but devices can be used kind of in tandem and sort of talk to each other in that way. And talk with the therapist and other people involved, so that two are involved. She said, AAC users may also benefit from the fun, interactive, and engaging nature of technology. Clinicians may consider supplementing low-tech therapy materials with other apps, videos, and photos made available on a separate mobile technology or a laptop. So you can find out more, as I said, in our article, but I know people are already doing that. It's just sort of a thing I wanted to emphasize as we went through. So when I was going through the technology masters, there weren't a lot of textbooks really available to us. We were using a lot of online resources, and those were great. And one of my favorite ones was called From Now On. It still exists. They're still publishing it for free. It's kind of a web-based journal at fno.org, and I liked From Now On. It really gave me a good sense of where to go in technology integration and just sort of the main ideas of technology integration. And they had a lot of great vocabulary. This one was about toolishness, and toolishness is foolishness. The cartoon caption is, "We make sure every student is equipped with every new tool." And they went on and elaborated that toolishness is closely associated with other terms such as foolishness, PowerPointlessness, Microsoftness, mental softness, Disneyfication, edutainment, and infotainment. And that was from the September 2001 issue. And I wanted to include this because what I'm often asked as people are looking for new resources is, what's the newest stuff? What's the newest apps that we should be using? I'm spending more, I kind of have fallen into that trap myself, especially early in my career, of just trying to have an overwhelming wave of apps available that I was talking about and using myself. And I've kind of stuck more to the tried and true rather than the new. And I'm really trying to use a lot of the same resources in a lot of different ways, customizing to whatever the learning situation is and the learner and the students that I work with. I think that SLPs might greet this with a little bit of annoyance because it is, I always found FNO to be a little harsh, and I sort of liked that about it. But also we could experience in our communication back by emoji, right? Some relief, knowing that it's nice to know that whatever we're using is good for the moment. Very Zen way of thinking. And we don't have to try necessarily to keep up with absolutely everything new, and stick with the tried and true. So try to experience that relief when you look at things, and just be present with what you're using, I think is a good tenet within instructional tech, and can inform what we do. As I was saying, this presentation is really not about literal conversations with instructional tech professionals. It's not about how to endure mansplaining, as can often happen, and I found myself sometimes having to avoid when I worked as an IT specialist at a really pretty demanding school where everyone was used to getting everything that they wanted when they wanted it. But since then, there was a phrase that I've always found to be really funny, and I had seen it online from Karen Janowski, who's a really good, a really amazing AT specialist, and she often hosts the AT chats on Twitter. Well, anyways, the phrase is, IT is the Department of No. And it is something that people often experience. You can kind of get turned off by your experience with really, really busy instructional tech professionals. And I just want to encourage you not to do that. And I made this little cartoon. Oops, hold on. Shoot, there we go. So try to go for that no, but there might really be a no about what you're asking, but finding out, well, what else could I do to get around the problem that I'm facing with technology? I made this with Plotagon. That's a free app, one of my favorites. I do a lot of social cognitive therapy, and it's really terrific for mapping out conversations with students. As I said, I'm trying to look at different modes of communication. So a dialogue between EdTech and SLP could take place theoretically during Snapchat, which I finally have figured out how to use in about the last year. But one of the things that comes out of EdTech is this idea of evaluation, and eval criteria can be really useful. I love Tony Vincent's website, so that's there and it's cited. That's learninginhand.com, and he's a great resource. This is a rubric that he has created focusing on the key aspects of relevance. So how relevant is it to the student, and educationally relevant, and customization. Can you change the content? Feedback, as a student provided any feedback in the app? That's one of the things I think of as like maybe important, maybe not as much. One of the things that in EdTech is a lot of times students might need to be able to use an app on their own and learn on their own, whereas in therapy, we're not really doing that so much. Does the app encourage higher order thinking skills? And they're really talking kind of about, like, we can translate that on our side to like narrative language and storytelling. How much can we step towards that at whatever developmental level the story needs to be? Usability, engagement. Engagement is really important, and can we share the things that we create? So this is an acronym that I came up with, and it's described in the article, and it's FIVES. And this is one of the ways that I've described to different groups how we can look at all the technology that's out there and try to evaluate it for ourselves and consider, is it fairly priced, interactive, visual, educationally relevant, and, for lack of a better term, speechy. So speechy meaning, what are the specific objectives that we could use to use the resource for? It doesn't matter that much what the resource was designed for, but how can we repurpose it? So good example of fair pricing is an app like Book Creator, where, or Pictello for that matter, because of its accessibility features within the app, where you can make a multimedia book, and it's so easy to use, and you can add any kind of material you want. You can share it however you want. And this is a $4.99 app, so the F doesn't stand for free anymore. When I first came up with this acronym, it did. So I'm like, I better change that, because it's not setting the best message. But Book Creator is one of my favorites, and really can be used in conjunction with communication systems to have students make choice about what's going to be on the page. I love the apps from Dr. Panda, as I mentioned. They provide like real world situations, like Dr. Panda's bus driver, Dr. Panda's toy cars. And the bus driver is a simulation of driving a bus around the town, and highly interactive. And as we said, not an experience we might be able to provide. And it's also visual. But things like your own photos can be really great resources for visuality. And we can make and share these so much more easily than we used to be able to. I often use in social cognitive therapy with my students a photo of something I do, something I experienced over the weekend, a problem, or just something that's narrative in nature, or just for them to be able to look at a photo and be able to figure out what the situation is. But in any mode of therapy, photos can be used to describe a situation, and verbs. And so whether on the macro storytelling level or just naming the things in the photo, just being able to leverage the use of photos and mobile tech is great. Educationally relevant, there's some really good people who've written about educational relevance in speech and language, like Barbara Aaron. Google Earth is just a really good example of that. It touches on every level of social studies and sometimes involves math and science as well, but it's so motivating for students to be able to visually look at their house, their own community, and comment and question around that. And as we said, Speechy is kind of, more up to you. Another not quite literal conversation between ed tech and speech and language. There's just so many good resources out there, like Free Tech for Teachers. And it's, not to contradict that I said F means fairly priced, but it's great when something's free too. And Richard Byrne writes this blog and has for many years. It's just a really good resource. And this post, he was talking about programming for elementary school students. And there's an app called Scratch Junior, which is an easier, much pared down version of the original Scratch object-oriented programming program for kids. So I replied to him that Scratch Junior, because it contains scenes, different settings and objects you can put into the scenes, and you can make them move just very easily by adding what's called a program. There are great, very simple instruction sheets on their website, and this is a free app, but it really can target a lot of things: categories and verbs, story elements, academic vocabulary or general vocabulary as well. So there's my fake tweet back to him. From Kerry, I got some great recent, updated, authentic activity, as she said, goals and strategies, things that she's been working on lately that really mirror what was going on in our article. The couple of examples to show you coming up are some activities that were used to target combining words and expanding vocabulary, and working on commenting and requesting and questions and labeling via the techniques of aided language stimulation, and lots of focus on core word use and generative language using the students' AAC apps, and also developing navigational competency. Toka Kitchen Monsters is a good example here of just being a really visual and interactive app. And so it contains no actual language in it. That's my favorite kind of app, actually. If it's pretty language neutral, it can be used to work on verbs and nouns, and having students make requests. The Collins Big Cat series of interactive books, these are free. My understanding is they are not going to be usable in iOS 11 unless they update them, but that's something I hope. But the farmer has lost his lunch, and then he needs, through a repeated line book, where is my banana, where is my sandwich, the students can find the different lost items. So it was designed there, and she used it to have the student locate the item and indicate where it had been found. There's some good connections too with curriculum. So many interactive apps that can be used in the same kind of way, that tie in really well with social studies curriculum or science curriculum in particular. I always find that there's a lot more great science apps out there, and Marco Polo Weather. In this one, you can change the weather, the cloud covering, the precipitation, the temperature, the wind. And when you do that, you see the effects on the character that's out on screen. That's a free app, and it's great for commenting and describing what's going on and building vocabulary. For students at a higher grade level, the Tiny Bop apps are really terrifically interactive and visual and educationally relevant. They do cost a couple of bucks, but I think they're worth it. This one is Tiny Bop Human Body, where you can drag, you can interact with each of the body systems. So respiratory, digestive, this one is digestive. And you can bring the food or drink over and then see it move and interact with it as, like, kind of push it through the mouth, push it down the gullet, push it into the stomach, tap to break it up. So for students working on academic vocabulary too. So a couple of my favorite places to find this sort of thing, it seems kind of like a duh, but the App Store has a really great organization in its education category, and you can go into the App Store and take a look at apps at different grade levels, or apps for different subject areas, or grade levels and then subject areas. And it's very nicely organized for education. Something you can search for, so particularly apps like we've seen, or I've shown a little bit of, I talked a little bit about Book Creator and showed you a little bit of Plotagon. Apps for kids to show what they know. That's kind of a common phrase in ed tech, show what you know. They're blank slates for creation, and they can be used with kids at all levels. And just being able to make something happen on screen is so motivating and can lead to language elicitation. You shouldn't necessarily discount all of the interactive websites that are still out there. So a lot of these can't be used on an iPad, but you could use an iPad and display on a smart board or just via a laptop or desktop an interactive website. Most of these are Flash-based, so they won't work on iPad, as I said, but I can always find an interactive website about any topic area academically by just Googling the words interactive and then say animal adaptations, whatever it might be, so that we can try to get into some of the curriculum vocabulary too. And I found some really good sites that I kind of call clearinghouse. The UEN Interactives, that's the Utah Education Network. It's a website. It has an interactive section there's a young one and there's an older kid one. Check that out. There's a great compendium site called learningscience.org. I also really like the website Interactive Sites for Education that breaks down, say, social studies into maps and, many other topics, and science into, as I said, animal adaptation. I love BrainPop and the web version of BrainPop. There's a BrainPop Junior too, which is moves much slower, which would be good for certain students, of course. They have a section called Game Up, and they have a lot of interactive games that link to a animated video about a curriculum topic. But there's a lot of just general ed tech resources that you can, so to speak, converse with and just use for your own, information that will still be informative to you, even though SLPs are not necessarily the intended audience. Smart Apps for Kids is one of my favorites. I check it every Friday for all their free apps. And they do have an SLP that writes for them too. Learning in Hand, I showed you that rubric earlier. Tony Vincent he has presented to audiences as special educators, and he just has a really good grasp on big ideas around mobile technology. So do check out his website. I love Teachers with Apps, which is, publishing more new information about apps and ways to use them. And I said Free Tech for Teachers. With all of these, kind of trying to get all this information in one place is really useful. So I like to use Feedly, the Feedly website, and you can just pop the web address of Smart Apps for Kids, and it puts it into your Feedly, kind of like a magazine. It used to be called RSS. That's basically what it is. It lets you kind of read everything as feeds. So we want to have just a few minutes for questions if we even have that. I haven't looked at the clock again. But again, where these slides are at bit.ly Sweeney AAC after work. And if these are of interest to you, I have my website at speechtechie.com, and you can find me on Twitter at speechtechie. Both Carrie Davis and I have written a lot for ASHA publications, mostly the ASHA Leader, or she's written a lot for the ASHA Leader blog. And mine is virtually the ASHA Leader blog because it doesn't go in the magazine. It goes in there like web content, whatever. But if you go to ASHA Wire and look me up or look Carrie Davis up, you can find some stuff that we've written, and all that stuff is free.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. It's one of the questions that I think a lot of us often get asked is what apps are good. So this was a wonderful overview.
Cool,
we are out of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
But,
if there's any questions you didn't get to ask me, Please, if you go to my website, my email is there, and I do always answer emails from real people. So feel free to email me with any questions. Sorry, I overpacked it like I usually do.
All right. No, and we'll have the presentation up on YouTube if that's okay with you too. So,
oh, of course. Yep. Go for it.
And then our Roku channel. All right. Thanks a lot, folks, and stick around for Vicki Clark.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Lucas. See you. Thank you, everyone.